Welcome back, everybody, to the OffBeat Sports Podcast. Today we're joined by Dennis Knudsen. He's engineer at 98.5 The Sports Hub, the Boston sports station, and he's also been traveling with the New England Patriots on their broadcast team since 1996. It's obviously really fun for us to have you, Dennis. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
So obviously, you've been working at the Sports Hub and working with the Patriots for some time, and I'm sure that there's a lot of personalities at the Sports Hub, and so one of the main guys that everyone either loves or hates is Mike Felger. So for you, obviously, you worked in the broadcast, you worked doing the audio mixing. Obviously, I'm sure you've come into close connection with Felger. What is it like to work with him, like in general?
So I'm going to tell you, overall at the Sports Hub, every single one of the personalities that you see or that you hear on the radio, they're all amazing people. They really are, and Felger included. And he may come across as the contrarian, but that's his shtick, right? That's what he does. But Felger he's a great guy. He's thankful. I mean, it was just yesterday where, every day I'm getting called up into the studio for something. And typically at 2:00, I check with James Stewart, the producer, or he'll text me and say, "Are you ready for your 2:00 call?" Because either Felger's keyboard is broken or he locked himself out of his computer and he can't get back in. So, but he's very thankful, and they're all great people to work with. They really are.
So you've obviously been working in sports, as you've told me in the past, for a long time. So what was your first job in sports media of any kind? Like, what got you into it? Like, what made you keep going with it?
I'll try and tell you the short story, but it's not, honestly, it's not too far off from what you guys are doing right now. This is something that you guys wanted to do. So what did you do? You just went and did it. So when I was a freshman in high school at Quincy High, I was signed up for TV production classes. And I really wanted to be in radio. I wanted to work in radio since I was probably, I don't know, as far back as I can remember, 3 or 4 years old. And right down the street from the high school was a radio station. It was an AM station called WJDA. And I walked over there. I think it was my second week of high school. I walked over to the radio station. I walked in and I asked for the general manager and I said, "I want to work in radio." And he said, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 14. He said, "You can't work in radio yet." I said, "But I want to work in radio." He said, "I'll tell you what, come back to me next year, your sophomore year, and we'll figure out an internship." So my first day of sophomore year, I walked back over to the radio station and I walked inside and I said, "I'd like to speak to Mr. Nicholson, please." John Nicholson, God rest his soul, an amazing person. And he looked at me when he came around the corner in the hallway and he said, "I knew you'd be back." And that was where I got my start in radio. And it wasn't any, obviously no major league sports at that point, but at the age of 15, I started getting involved with producing the morning show. I was producing high school sports on the radio. I never did anything on air. I was always like a behind the scenes guy, whether it was engineering or producing. And keep in mind that I was still in school during all of this. So I would produce the morning show at 5 a.m. I'd get in there at 4:30, produce the morning show till 8, walk over to the high school, check into the homeroom, check into the front office, which was my homeroom. And I would go to school for 2 periods, go back to the radio station until lunch, and then come back, finish my day of school. And at the end of school, I would go back over to the radio station and work until about 6 or 7 o'clock at night. So, I literally just put in the hours. And that led to a whole bunch of different things. The news director there, Joe Catalano, who works for Quincy Access Cable at this point, because WJDA is long gone, he was friends with the chief engineer at WBCN. And I had been at JDA for a while. When I graduated high school and started in college, Joe got me in touch with Jim Rakey, who was the chief of BCN at the time. And that's how I got into Boston radio and working on the Patriots, was through Jim Rakey. And that was in 1995. I worked as an intern for about 2 months, and then he started paying me to go to remotes and work on the Patriots games. And the rest kind of goes from there. It was all about being persistent, I guess. I didn't give up, and I didn't take no for an answer ever. So.
So did you notice a difference in Brady's attitude this past season?
If I had a nickel, Nick, for every time that somebody asked me a question like that, I wouldn't have to work at all. So the truth is, we travel with the Patriots and we do see the players and we're in the locker room and, we're on the planes, we're in the hotels, et cetera, et cetera. But there is such a I don't want to say separation, but there's a separation, and it's a professional thing because we're there to do a job. So I didn't interact with Brady in any real fashion unless I was setting up for an interview or something. As far as from my standpoint, where I was up in the booth, where I do my job from mixing the audio, it's hard for me to say. The guys who would probably know more are my two guys who were down in the field with parabolic mics, Mike Perry and Chuck Morrison. And the producer, Mark Capello, he spends a lot of time at the stadium actually doing press conferences, et cetera, et cetera. So did I notice? The only thing that I can notice is the same thing that you guys notice when you're watching TV is his mannerisms, maybe things that he utters under his breath as he's walking off to the sidelines after a bad play or, things like that. But from a personal standpoint, I can't say whether or not I did. Now, from a sports radio standpoint, yeah, I can absolutely say, yeah, man, he didn't have his receivers. He didn't have what he wanted. He wasn't getting what he wanted. Belichick was probably not happy with him. He wasn't happy with Belichick. I mean, that's what everybody's basically saying, but I can't say whether I saw that firsthand or
not. So from your standpoint, like I know you say you don't interact with them a lot, but just on the outside looking in, or just even as a fan, did you notice or get any hints that Brady would be leaving this offseason?
My personal feeling, I honestly thought that he was going to stay. I thought that he was going to end his career as a Patriot. Only based on what he had said in the past. Of course, once the season is over, it might have been a little bit telling in his last press conference because he had his duffel bag right beside him and he was gone right out the door. And I only know that because I saw what everybody else saw on TV. And also my sideline guy, Chuck, who handles those post-game interviews, he's right beside the podium. He actually said to me when Brady was coming out, he said, dude, he's got his duffel bag with him. That's weird because I'm not sure whether he ever carried it or not. But I don't know. I thought he was going to come back. I'm a Tampa Bay fan when we're not playing them right now. So
So obviously you don't like directly interact with the players unless you're setting them up for an interview, like you said. Are those guys like cordial with you guys? How does that work? Like if you're gonna go set a guy up, like do you have a chance to talk with them at all, or do you ever like hey, what's up, or is it just kind of
so
just like, all right, I got to get the mic on you and get out of the way?
Right. So I guess, you know what, and again, this goes back to the professional atmosphere and the professional behavior that we have to kind of express when we're doing a job, basically. There are certain guidelines and certain memos that are sent out to staff, to radio partners that travel with the team. And some of those are don't interact with the players unless you've got a reason to interact with the players. So during the travel, not so much. Maybe in the whole, I mean, as far as riding on an elevator with Julian Edelman or Tom Brady or any of those guys, yeah, that happens. And there's a hello and a Merry Christmas here or there from the guys if you see them. It's when I started in '96, I was actually on the sidelines for the first 4 years with the parabolic mic. That was my first job on this broadcast, and it was from '96 through '99. And those players back then, obviously I was down there. I was around them a lot. So I actually interacted with them a lot more than I do with the guys now, only because of the location of where I'm doing my job up in the booth. So guys back then, like Zolak, Ted Johnson, Teddy Bruschi, Adam Vinatieri, Chris Slade, those are all the Chad Eaton, those are all the guys that I interacted with and was very friendly with. Zolak. But as far as nowadays, yeah, everybody's cordial. It's just where it's frowned upon to really, try to interact while we're there on a professional level. So, but yeah, I mean, they're all cordial. They say hello when they get or if you have the opportunity, you can say hello. You get a hello back.
Growing up, did you have a favorite sport or a team to watch?
Red Sox. I was a Red Sox guy. I remember I was 11 years old. It was 1986 when the Red Sox, they lost. The Buckner, the ball, the whole 9 yards. And I remember watching my mother cry in the living room, and I said, "What's the matter?"
I have his autograph on the picture of him missing the ball.
Do you really?
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. That's the guy he ended up turning to be, right? He ended up turning to be that guy. He was very cool, and he came back and he got a big standing O for I forget how many years ago when he came back out to Fenway. But I remember watching my mother cry, thinking, "What's going on here?" It's a game, and you get sucked in. I mean, I had the My aunt used to take us to games and would sit in the bleachers. Imagine that in the 80s, right? A little kid in the bleachers. Oh, forget about it. But we had the jackets with the Jim Rice and the whoever else on the little name patches. So I was a Red Sox kid growing up.
So in Super Bowl 52, and they lost to the Eagles, like what was your take on the Malcolm Butler benching? Do you have any insight on like what might have gone down? Do you have any like takes on what could have gone down?
I do know this. I do know that if I was the coach, I probably would have put him in the game. That's all I know. As far as inside takes, I mean, anything that I say is going to be everything that everybody heard in the media already. Again, I was up in the booth. The Super Bowls are a little bit different. So if the Super Bowl starts at 6:30 p.m., we're there at about 7 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, because we do pregame shows, and we've got Felger and Maz and Beetle and Zoe and all these other guys. Big Jim Murray comes in and does a show. So I'm literally in the booth all day. As far as what I've heard, it's basically what everybody else has heard is, did he get in a fight with one of Belichick's kids? Did he mouth off? Was he out late the night before? I'm not sure. Again, the only thing I can say is the way that Super Bowl ended up ending, it's just, I mean, that almost hurts worse than the perfect season. The perfect season was really difficult. Super Bowl 52, man, Nick Foles. I mean, really?
Yeah,
That's who we're gonna lose to.
Yeah, that one was really tough. I remember watching it and I was just like, we should not have lost that game.
So interesting story about that game. There's Super Bowl post-game parties. Now, I don't know if a lot of people know this or not, but whether the team wins or loses, the party still goes on. There's still a party. You made it to the Super Bowl. It's a pretty huge accomplishment. You're the AFC champions. So there is still a party. All those acts are booked. And that year it happened to be, was J-Lo. And it was at was it at one of the convention centers, I think? And it was freezing cold, man. That place was no joke in February. We get to the post-game party that I didn't even want to go to. J-Lo comes out on stage and people are walking around like it's a funeral because they're all Patriots fans. And J-Lo says, "Hey, I'm here to play music. Whatever you guys want to hear, just yell it out." Nobody said anything. Nobody cared. Everybody's walking around like we just lost to the Eagles. So yeah, it wasn't not a good time.
They hated me after that game because I thought it was so cool because Nick Foles is like the underdog backup.
Yeah.
Nick literally wouldn't talk to me about it for like 2 months. Like,
I couldn't believe it.
As a Patriots fan, how do you like?
I wasn't even supportive of the Eagles.
You were like, wow, I'm not even mad. Nick Foles is so good.
Hey, did you guys hear Vosi? I think he's breaking up. Mike, I can't see anymore, buddy.
I just thought it was cool because he was like an underdog, like backup, and he came back from injury. But
you know what? Yeah,
you're still a Patriots fan. You can't.
I get it. I get the take. I get it. You know, it's the underdog. I mean, look at the Patriots back in 01. I remember I looked at my producer when Bledsoe got hit off the sidelines by Mo Lewis, and I looked at my producer and I said, "Well, there goes the season." And later on in the AFC Championship game, Brady goes down with an apparent ankle injury or something, and I looked at my producer and I said, "Well, there goes the season." You know, we didn't know Tom Brady, and at that point, we didn't want Drew Bledsoe to come back in, but he came in and he had an amazing throw to the back corner of the end zone to was it Patton? I think it was David Patton, the back corner of the end zone in Pittsburgh, and I mean, Bledsoe won that AFC Championship game. He ultimately got us to that Super Bowl.
So, I had a question on. Obviously, you were around the team in, you know, like the mid-'90s and stuff like that. You said you were on the sideline. So for you work with Zoe now on the show, and you worked with Zoe then when he was playing. So, like, is it weird for you? Is it like a different dynamic, like, to work with these guys when they're on the field and then be like, you know, especially Zoe, because you know him a lot more, because you hear what he says and you talk to him a lot more than the rest of them? Does your relationship grow, or does it have a totally different dynamic?
It's totally different. So I'm going to explain. Back in the day, I'll give you a quick story because I like stories, right? It's the best way to really get your point across. Flying on the charter back then, we flew on Northwest, and it was a smaller plane than the Patriots have now, and it was 3 seats on either side of the aisle. And the only separation between us and the players was a row of seats where security sat. And the head of security back then was Frank Mendez, and everybody called him the Terminator, the human Terminator, because he just didn't take any junk from anybody. He was a great guy, I think, because he liked me. He always had an empty seat, two empty seats next to him in this really small plane. So he'd always call me back and invite me to sit in one of the empty seats, which was great. But I knew halfway through the flight, at some point, Zolak and Vinatieri would be throwing M&Ms, Skittles, or whatever at Frank that would ultimately end up off of the back of my head. So what you hear and how you hear Zo now is how he is and always has been. When I first started working with him, in a professional setting at the radio station, yeah, it was different. It was different at the beginning because it was Scott Zolak. It was a quarterback. It was the guy who came in and pushed me off to the side in St. Louis because he had to go back up Bledsoe because Bledsoe had a bone coming through his finger or something. I don't know if you guys remember that. But it was Scott Zolak. He was an NFL quarterback, and now here I am working with him. When I started working with him every day at the Sports Hub about 3 years ago, because we've been working together on the broadcast obviously forever. But once it gets to an everyday perspective, it's different. We're really good friends. He's a great guy. He'll do anything for you. And it's a good relationship. It's a really good relationship. He's got great kids, a great wife. It's a totally different dynamic now than it was back then.
So as someone who's fairly close to the team, I know you don't interact with them, but did you notice, so it's like a big topic right now, but did you notice any deterioration in the relationship between Brady and McDaniels?
Again, the only thing that I can see is what you guys see. And I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm not sure that anybody is ever going to really know what happened. I mean, I think Brady just put out, was it Twitter or Instagram just a couple days ago? Yeah, he put out that post about, we're brothers for life, brothers forever, and, stop printing this crap, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to ruin the mystery of it, but I think a lot of it is what the media puts out and what they want to get. It's all about viewership. It's all about readers. It's all about ratings, right? So if you've got the hottest take or the most controversial take, chances are somebody's going to listen, somebody's going to watch, or somebody's going to read what you're putting out there. I can't say whether I did or not. Again, it would only be what you guys saw, being up in the booth.
You're a Patriots fan. You are around the team. You're invested in, obviously your work surrounds the Patriots and you're an avid fan, as you've told me. What do you expect for them next year? Just as a fan, what do you think they're going to have for a record? What are your hopes for them next year?
I've seen them go 5-11, and I've seen them go 16-0 or 18-1. I think back to what was it? Was it 06 when Brady went out with the ACL?
Was it 7? I think it was 7.
07 was the 07 was the perfect season.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So either way, anyway.
I think it was the year after the perfect season. It was 08.
Yeah, it was 08.
So we had a backup come in, and we went 11-5, which, you know what, 11-5 back in 1995, 96, 97, 98. You're a 1 or a 2 seed with an 11-5 record, right? Of course, nowadays, if you're not going 14-2 or 15-1, you're lucky if you get into the playoffs. I mean, there's this year. I'll tell you what, man. If they can get out of the season 11-5, 10-6, I'll be happy. Oh, yeah. Don't forget, there's that extra playoff spot too this year, right? Isn't that starting this year?
Yeah. I think
So
that's next year. I think the additional game starts this year.
No, it's the other way around. It's playoffs this year. Additional.
Yeah. So the extra playoff game, the extra team in the play, not the extra playoff game, but the extra team in the playoffs this year, and I think that eliminates one of the buys. So you've got a 1 seed that gets the bye, and then the rest of the teams are just there's no bye. Yeah. So I mean, it's even more important now than it was last year. I mean, playing for a 2 seed was great because you still got a bye. You had to travel for the AFC championship game or the championship game, NFC, AFC, but yeah, it's going to be. You know what? If they're competitive, man, and they can go out there, I mean, so here's the thing. We get a lot of the D that went away. Edelman is still fired up from what it looks like on Twitter or wherever you see him on social media. He said something about not going anywhere, right? What did he say? Not going nowhere on Twitter or something like that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you can hope that he stays fired up, and whether it's Stidham or anybody that they bring in, you just hope that his work ethic is where it needs to be, right? Because that's what Brady was all about. It was all about work ethic, getting there long before anybody else and working out. And that's huge when it comes to a team sport like this. If your leader, your quarterback, is going to come in at 5:30 in the morning and start working out long before you have to be there. What's up, Ty? How are you? Sorry, Ty was just walking through. That's what they're looking for. Not just a good quarterback on the field, but a good role model in the locker room. You need a leader in that locker room. And I mean, we've still got D-Max, so I mean, I assume him and Slater obviously are going to be guys that some of these younger kids are going to look to.
So I'm going to jump to a different topic, and then we can jump back to Patriots. The Red Sox, obviously.
Whatever you want, man.
Obviously, you said you were a Red Sox fan, and there's so much going on right now with the news of they're trying to put together a proposal for the players. And when we talked to Manny Del Carmen, we asked him about it as well, and he was talking about the pay and the circumstances for the players. What do you think as far as the MLB? Like, do you because they're talking about the players cutting salary, they're talking about a lot of that stuff. But at the end of the day, I feel like a lot of people just want to see baseball come back. But what do you think?
I think that if we get baseball back, I mean, how is it going to work? We're going to have a shorter season, or all these games that we've missed just gone? Do they make them up? Do they play later in the year? I don't know. That's where players' unions and contracts and negotiations come into play. And do they take a pay cut? Do they do revenue sharing? Like I think they're trying to do. Are they trying to do that with the NBA? Or is it with the MLB? They're trying to eliminate salaries and do revenue shares. Correct?
Yeah, they're trying to say
they were going to give like 50% to the ownership and 50% to the players.
Yeah.
Which, like, as an owner, I think they would take less than 50%, because if the players can agree to it, any baseball is better than none. So
any baseball is better than none, especially for a sport with Major League. And this is something that I dreaded when I worked in baseball. Is the games are just. They're so long. I mean, when you've got an AL East game between the Yankees and the Red Sox, or the Orioles and the Red Sox, and a 9-inning game is lasting 4 hours and 15 minutes.
Yep.
Nobody wants to watch that. I don't care if you're the biggest baseball fan in the world, man. That's just a slow sport to watch.
I mean, if it's AFC Championship, Red Sox, Yankees, I'd watch it.
Well, I mean, that's obviously, of course, but I'm talking, game 27.
Yeah.
It's but yeah. I think if the players are smart, they'll do it, because you don't want to do anything to really not put a black eye, but you don't want to do anything to push away viewers that you already have a hard time getting as it is, and if the sport's already kind of hurting as it is, and maybe, I don't know what the numbers are or the ratings for viewership, but we all know that baseball is slow. And if you're trying to get people to watch it again, then you do everything you can to play baseball this summer.
You also don't want to halt their progress as athletes too, because they're only getting older. Missing a season could be a difference between a long-term contract for a player or not getting.
And you're right. And baseball contracts are ginormous. They're so huge. And think about it. You're getting paid more than, I mean, it's a crap ton of money, right? And your risk of huge injury in baseball, you're not out there tackling. I mean, it's barely that's the other thing. And I heard Maz say this morning on Channel 25, and it was a great point that if any sport can come back right now with social distancing in place, it's baseball.
Easily.
Right? I mean, you got left field, right field, center field, guys at base.
I think the only issue is everyone's touching the ball.
It's still probably going to come back early July.
Yeah, and I think whatever form it comes back, or whatever frequency or how many games, these guys are obviously going to be tested quite a bit, And there was it MLB who just had the test where it was less than 1% of
it was 0.7%. They tested 5,300 people, and 60 came back with the positive.
With the antibodies.
Yeah.
So that's crazy.
It's crazy to me, because I think if you look at it, the players don't want to cut revenue share. They don't want to cut 50-50. But if you look at it, obviously you're not going to make gate. You're not going to get people coming in. You're not going to make all that money from selling tickets. But obviously you make your TV deal money, you make all that stuff. But at the same time, for the players, it's that could actually turn out really big because of how many people would watch it, because there's nothing else to watch. So the revenue that they would generate from just being on TV and being the only American sport running would be absolutely massive. So the amount of money that I think they would lose is a lot less, because you're going to get so much more attention because as much as everyone hates baseball because the games are 4 hours long, what else?
They're hungry.
What
Yeah,
else?
I don't watch a whole lot of baseball, but if it came back, I probably would watch it just to.
The draft, just like the NFL draft. Like it wasn't even
Right.
in person, but everyone's like, whatever, it's sports. I'm going to watch all of the draft. I literally watched the whole draft. Like
Yeah, I did too.
I've never watched the entire draft before, but it's like there's nothing else to watch. So
and that's an excellent point, Mike.
They're going to be the only sport running. So why wouldn't, you know what I mean? If I'm the players, you get way more attention because then you look technically to the sports world, you look like heroes because you're the first like American major sport to come out and be like, we're going to play and figure it out. I think it's interesting because, you know, the revenue that they can generate the only American sport playing is going to be absolutely massive. And everyone's going to dive right into baseball. And I bet you gain more fans out of it because everyone's going to be like, wow, I respect those guys for going out there. But the problem is how much, you know, like bitching and moaning they do is like such a problem because all you hear, especially if you listen to like Felger and Maz, all they talk about is how much the players just sound like such wuss because all they do is complain about everything.
Right.
If you went out there and you didn't have all the gossip, they'd look like amazing people for doing it. But because they gossip so much and make such problems, I think it's going to be – I still think they're going to turn a big profit, but I think it makes them look bad at the same time.
You don't want to kill the goose that's laying the golden eggs, man, you know? I'll say it again, you make an excellent point, Mike, that if it's literally the only game in town, right? People are going to watch it. So that brings up the other question is, what is the NBA going to do? The NBA is talking about coming back with just playoff teams, correct?
It's going to happen there. Yeah, I think they were talking about just that. And I think as an NBA fan, or as an NBA fan, I would love to see it, but I do think it might be a little too soon just because of all the close contact and all, like, there's actually been a lot of cases in the NBA.
NBA is what sparked all of the sports canceling.
You're exactly right.
If Rudy Gobert doesn't go touching all those microphones and then making a joke out of it and then coming down with it on the night of the game right before the tip-off, none of this happens. Like, as far as it doesn't happen when it happens.
Well, it all happens.
It might happen like a day later.
Yeah, but
it'll happen. It'll just happen later. And I remember watching that when it happened, and I remember thinking, I mean, I work in sports radio, right? This is what we rely on. This is what we do. This is what we do every day. We talk about sports. Without sports, what is sports radio? Mm-hmm. Thankfully, they're finding things to talk about. But when I heard about that, I immediately sent a text to our group text saying, this isn't good. I mean, there's a lot of people losing a lot of money right now.
And I think it's actually a blessing that it's the NFL offseason because there's just so much conjecture that you can talk about. Just you can literally just in like I think the deterioration between Brady and McDaniel. I think that's a result of having not that much to talk about. They try and bring up stuff that might have happened and just to get talking.
So another thing that I was thinking about before, if you think about baseball, right, in the summer, they have no competition throughout the summer as far as the ratings because there's no other real sport to watch. Everything's in the fall and in the early spring. Mm-hmm. So if these sports like basketball's talking about starting in
July.
Well, no, not this season, but yes, this season. But I mean, next year they're talking about starting on Christmas. So if they play a full season of baseball next year, but basketball's also going on, I think that's huge for baseball because that makes them be like, okay, everyone's going to want to watch the NBA and we're actually going to have to compete. So they'll have to make the changes that all of the viewers of baseball actually want to see. Like find a way to shorten the games. No one wants to sit there for 4.5 hours, like you said. And if they have to compete with other sports, like other major sports, because they can't start right now and they won't be able to start their seasons on time later, I think it'll make all of the leagues actually improve on what people want to see done because they'll want to gain, viewership of their leagues because they're going to have to compete with the other leagues at the same time. Unlike baseball's never had to compete with anyone. So I think for that, it'll make them make the changes that everyone wants to see because otherwise you're just going to be in a constant fight with the NBA, which is constantly growing.
Right. And again, that's another good point because I mean, do you bring in a pitch clock? What do you do? I mean, it's the only thing you can do. I mean, is bring in a pitch clock, right? How else do you speed up baseball?
next season, so Brady's going to be with the Bucks. Do you think his play will decline next season? Do you think he'll show some of his age?
I want to say, did we maybe see some? And you guys asked me this question earlier. And did we maybe see some of that earlier, or later in the season last year, or even earlier in the season last year? Was it a receiver running a wrong route, or was it Brady not getting the ball there? It's a great question. And Belichick, if anything, usually, I guess history has shown that he typically releases guys a year too early instead of a year too late.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I think that's a great question, and it's something that's going to be fun to watch. I mean, look, it's going to be fun to watch him and Gronk play again anyway, because you got an all-world tight end and the best quarterback, probably maybe the best player to ever play the game in Tom Brady. It's going to be fun to watch them. And will he decline? Who knows? You know what? If he's not throwing the long ball, they just throw a bunch of underneath stuff, which is what he's been doing anyway. He's always throwing to the slot guy, right? He's going to Edelman. He's going to Welker. He's going to, or he's doing whatever.
A seam.
A seam. Yeah, right. A seam up to Gronk. So I think that's what we're probably going to see. I mean, Brady's not going to be throwing, 60-yard bombs. Like, that's not what he does.
Yeah.
I'm personally on where. Well, as a fan, I'm disappointed I won't get to see the Patriots match up against the Bucks next year. But I think, as just just using my brain, I think it's beneficial for Stidham not to have to take on that pressure and go up against Brady and the Bucks next year, so he can just try and be comfortable in his role.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
Listen,
don't think Brady. Go ahead.
No, I was going to. Don't we? Not this year. Do we go down? I think we go down there 2021.
I think
I think we go to the Bucks, or do they come here?
I think they come here.
Yeah, they might come here.
They
Oh,
come here, I think.
that would be pretty cool. That's going to be a fun game if he's still playing at that point.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
he'll be playing at that point.
Well,
And
you know what?
Start.
Somebody asked me the other day. They said, Tom Brady is dead to me, and I said, why is Tom Brady dead to you? Well, because he left, and Gronk too. I don't like Gronk. And I said, well, okay, think about this for a minute. How long have you been at your job? You've been at your job 20 years, right? So if somebody came around and said to you, hey, I want to pay you twice as much, and I'm going to let you make all the calls. You're in charge of everything. Wouldn't you go? I mean,
Which I'm less concerned about Brady. I think where Brady earned his right to do whatever he wants, but I think the way Gronk left, I think that left a sour taste in my mouth personally, just because the way he left was kind of it was kind of rude, and I think he played around with the Patriots way too much, and it kind of I think that had a huge impact on last season, because it was a huge question mark. Oh, is Gronk going to come back and help the offense? And I think him playing around with the team did not help.
Yeah, another thing about Gronk is I didn't like how it took him so long to retire. Like, we all knew he was going to retire, but he still held it out all off season, and we had a chance to fill a tight end hole with a guy like Jared Cook, and without him, the tight ends were terrible. And if Gronk could have just retired right off the bat, we could have signed a better tight end, and it would have been a lot easier on Brady to have that guy. But it just took him forever. And then once he finally did retire, he stays retired for a year, and then he goes to the Bucks, which I mean, I don't mind Brady going, but Gronk going, it made me a little bit upset. But it's all right. I don't think it's as bad as just signing with them for a different reason, but I don't mind Brady.
So did he ever actually sign his retirement papers?
no.
Well, I didn't think he did.
They said
I
that
think he did.
times, because Robert Kraft was like, he hasn't signed his retirement papers. They're waiting down at Gillette. Like he said,
Because he was I think he was just playing with the Patriots, making everyone think he was going to come back into the game. I think he just it's just his personality. He likes to fool around.
Stupid crap where he'd be like, big announcement coming. He'd be like, see you, Cream. And then he'd be like,
WWE.
he'd be like
WWE, right.
and then he'd be like,
Gronk's beach party.
Gronk Beach. He'd be like, I don't care about Gronk Beach.
Hey, Gronk's beach party that Belichick went to, right? So
I know.
That was questionable.
But you know what? At the end of the day, guys, right? It's all a business. I mean, and you're right. Yeah, I mean, the stuff he was putting out, the misleading information on Twitter, and it's him. It's his character. You're talking about a guy who has a lot of character, and that's just what he did. Did it leave a sour taste in my mouth? No, I mean, again, the guy played here his whole career, and I mean, how many? What did he win? 3 Super Bowls?
Yeah.
3, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, think about what Brady and Gronk brought us, right? Think
Yeah.
about what they were able to bring to New England. And again, you guys don't know because, and again, and here's the other thing. I mean, before I started this job with the Patriots in '95, I wasn't a huge football fan. I didn't even really watch football, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. But I do know this: the Patriots were not a good team. I remember talking to Pete Brock, he was the center for the Patriots way back when. He used to do the pregame show. And I asked him a question at Foxborough Stadium once. I said, what was it like when you played? And he said, Dennis, you could have archery practice into the stands, miss all the time, and not hurt anybody because there was nobody there. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's what Crafton has built with, I mean, starting with a guy like Bledsoe and moving on to Brady, who obviously built this huge dynasty with Belichick. I mean, it's pretty cool. It's pretty amazing. It's something that I'm not sure any of us will see again for a long, long time, if we even see it again.
So, my last question here for you. They recently announced the Patriots Hall of Fame. It's going to be Seymour. And the other candidates were Vrabel and Bill Parcells. So everyone's kind of just shying away from Parcells because of the way he left New England. But, as you're talking about, they weren't always the Patriots we see now. Everyone talks about him kind of ushering in a sense of legitimacy to the Patriots organization. So obviously Seymour's very deserving. Like, there's no reason he shouldn't be in. But do you think
he's a great? So Seymour's a great dude too. He's a very nice guy, very cordial. Our producer for the Patriots games, Mark Capello, he actually posted on Facebook. When they lost, which game was it? Which Super Bowl was it? 07. It was a losing Super Bowl. Seymour was the last one in the locker room answering questions. He was literally the last player in there.
07. They talked about that the other day.
Yeah, and he was literally the last guy in there because that's what he did. He was a professional, so he deserves it. Parcells, look, man, he came in and he wanted to buy the groceries, right? That was his big line. He wanted to buy the groceries. If they want him to cook, he wants to buy the groceries, and he did. He left in a kind of a crappy way, but I still think you can't not recognize, what he did for the organization. Because, I mean, think about it. I mean, Belichick, obviously, the owners all know all the coaches, but Belichick was able to work with the Patriots and for the Patriots under Parcells. So, I mean, maybe that's where the relationship with Kraft and Belichick started. Actually, I got a funny Parcells story if you want to hear it. And it's about that Super Bowl. So,
of course,
it was down in New Orleans, and this is my first year traveling with the team in '96. And it happened so fast. And next thing you know, here I am standing on the field at the Superdome, and we're at the Super Bowl. It's like, I don't know how we got there. Again, I wasn't a huge football guy, but it was just like, this is incredible. I'm at the freaking Super Bowl, right? So we were doing pregame interviews on the sidelines. And my job was to bring Robert Kraft the headset and the microphone and say, here you go, Mr. Kraft. And I've got pictures of it somewhere. And I realized like 10 minutes before the interview that I didn't have the microphone. I left it in the locker room. We had set up some equipment in the locker room between Chris Slade and Ted Johnson's locker so that we could do post-game interviews in the case they won. So I'm like, well, I really need that microphone. So I go over to the locker room and I look in and I see the security guard. It's Frank Mendez, the guy who used to give me the seats on the plane. And I said, Frank, I left my microphone in there. I've got to go get this mic. And he looks at me, calls me a couple of names. He looks around the corner. He goes, hurry up, go and get it. So I run in, I grab the mic. Slade and Johnson are both saying, hey, what's up, man? How's it going? This is like, we're talking a half an hour before the kickoff of the Super Bowl, right? I grab the mic, I stand up and I turn around and I get this look from Slade, and I turn around and there's Parcells in my face. He just looks at me and he says, what the F are you doing in my locker room on Super Bowl Sunday? My feet never hit the floor, man. I was out of that locker room so fast. So I don't know, maybe he was mad at me. Maybe that's why he left.
That's awesome.
Breaking news: Dennis Knudsen runs Bill Parcells out of New England.
Yeah. Yeah. I got a Belichick story too.
What did you do to Belichick? What
It
did
was all right. All right. Let me tell you the Belichick story, and this is a funny story, and I like the story. We so flying on the charter, we have the same flight attendants all the time, and one of the flight attendants, her name was Sarah, and pre 9/11, they used to let us sit up in the cockpit for takeoff and landing because we're on a charter, so it's not like a regular flight, right? So I had met the pilot. His name was Sam because we used to get to Logan long before the team showed up. So I'm talking to the pilot, Sam. We're in the plane waiting for everybody to show up. And Sam is chatting with me, blah, blah, blah. We were going to Denver. He says, oh, this and that, and the landing. And I said, that sounds awesome. And he says, oh, you got to come up for the landing. It's going to be really cool coming into Denver. You see the mountains? I said, absolutely, I'm there. So halfway through the flight, I see Belichick walk up into the cockpit. And Sarah comes back, the flight attendant, and she says, I don't think we're going to be able to get you up there today. Coach is up there. And I said, it's fine, whatever. It's his team. It's his plane. He can do whatever he wants. I'm not going to argue the guy, right? I don't even know who I am. A little while later, I see Belichick come out of the cockpit and go right to his seat. And I'm like, well, that's interesting. Sarah comes back, grabs me, and says, eyes forward, follow me. And I'm like, oh, God, what happened? So next thing I know, I'm in the cockpit. I sit down, Sarah's strapping me in, and Sam, the pilot, says, yeah, Dennis, I'll tell you what. Belichick thought he was going to sit in here, but I said, no way, sir. That seat's reserved for Dennis tonight. He said, you did what? You did what? So I said, okay. So we land the plane, and the players and coaches get off of the plane first. We have to wait for them before we can disembark the plane. And I'm standing in the cockpit behind Sam and the co-pilot, and Sam's about this tall. The co-pilot's about this tall. I'm 6'1", and Belichick comes walking by, and the pilot, Sam, says, yeah, coach, that was that automated landing I was telling you about. Belichick stops dead in his tracks, looks me in the eyes, and says, I thought you were going to let Dennis land the plane. And then he turned and walked away, and I'm like, awesome. This is my first interaction with Bill Belichick.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
That's awesome. All right. Well, with that those great stories, just about wraps up tonight's episode. Thank you to Dennis Knudsen for taking the time to talk with us.
Absolutely, guys.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. And as always, follow us on Instagram at @offbeat_sports and subscribe to our YouTube channel.